Hey, can you hear me okay?
Perfect,
Yeah,
perfect. How about
perfect.
us?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Cool. So we might make a start as people continue to trickle in. First of all, a big thank you, Leah, for jumping into this webinar. This is an amazing opportunity for us. We do appreciate it. Is it true you're in Bali still?
Yeah.
That's amazing. How is it?
It's Bali. It's lovely all the time.
Yeah,
It's very quiet right now though.
yeah,
Most
yeah,
places are closed,
yeah,
but
yeah,
the Balinese are very, it's a very chill kind of environment. Nobody's panicking or
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
that's amazing. And the weather would be fantastic, I imagine, as well.
very hot. It's like the hottest time of year right now, very humid and warm.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, we might make a start. So first of all, we just wanted to take a quick aside and just tell everybody at home that's watching how this all came about. So we really this started, quite a while ago when JD and I were actually sitting the GAMSAT ourselves, and then what we sort of found was as we were sitting the exam, there was a lot of, I guess, stresses that would surround our lives, and we would be able to cope with those until they started to infiltrate the study itself. And when those sort of stresses and anxieties will start infiltrating the study, that's when it would sort of exemplify to us that we really aren't being very grounded as much as possible, and we are letting external factors sort of influence how we are going about into our studies and so on. So fast forward, it was about a month or two ago, we were getting a lot of queries from our students wondering how to cope with all the different, I guess, changes that's going on with the GAMSAT and the impact that this has had on their studies as well. So, JD and I thought, we're just going to go straight to the source, straight to the expert. We'll put ourselves out there. We got in contact with Balance, and we really wanted you to be part of this webinar. So thank you so much for agreeing and taking the time out on your Saturday. Not too far from Australia, but quite a while away. So it's an awesome experience. So just in regards to this webinar, this is what we'll be covering today. We'll quickly, meet Leah, find out more about who she is if we haven't met her on her previous platforms. And then what we've done is we've narrowed down 4 of the key major questions that, a lot of our students are experiencing going into the GAMSAT. And that is revolving around how to cope with the anxiety of things we can't control, coping with the fear of the unknown, loss of focus, loss of drive and motivation. And I know, Leah, you speak about a lot of things in the Balance app regarding these things here. So, we really think this is a great opportunity. And finally, we'll finish off with a little bit of Q&A if we have a bit of time. Cool. So
Great.
I guess first things first, Leah,
Yeah.
welcome and tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I actually pronounce my name Leah, but some people call me Leah too. I'm actually American. I'm from the US, but I've been living in Bali for the last 3 years. And I'm a meditation teacher. I wasn't always a meditation teacher. Prior to that, I actually studied psychology. I have my degree in psychology, and I studied some neuropsychology, and I was really interested in going into the more therapy route with my life. But I had a very big change in my life at that point. I went through a divorce, and I ended up working in business with my degree. So I started working in tech organizations in Seattle, Washington. First it was startups, and then I was hired by Microsoft. I worked with the Xbox team. I worked with designers and developers, and in advertising and marketing and business development. And I did that for about half a decade with them before working with other startups. It was quite a interesting detour in my career. And I remember one day just realizing I had taken a very strange path for myself because I had a lot of anxiety. I was struggling with panic attacks. I was working 80 hours a week and not taking care of myself. And, as a child, I had meditated, and I had found that to be a great source of healing and for my mind body system and for stress release as a child, because I grew up in a kind of chaotic environment. But I'd forgotten about that tool. And as a young adult, I thought I could just push through and do everything myself, being like a strong-willed person, and exercise a lot. And uh, my body broke down. I became very sick, and mentally, physically sick. And I remember having this really incredible doctor who told me, you should consider doing a yoga class, or change of pace, slow things down a little bit. You really need it. And I stepped into a yoga studio, and this was about, I think my first yoga class was about 11 years ago. And it really just changed my life. I met an incredible teacher who was a former monk, and he became my first meditation teacher. So I really began studying it intensely and taking trainings. And then I went on to meet other incredible experts in the field of meditation who became my mentors. And out of just pure wanting to develop myself personally was what drove me to do it. I didn't think I'd end up being a teacher of meditation, but it became a really strong call. And I realized, like, this is what I need to share with people who are struggling with anxiety and burnout and the things that I've been going through in my life. So I'm just happy to be here now. I've been teaching for almost 6 years now, and Los Angeles and around the world, and currently I'm in Bali, and then recently with the Balance app. So I'm one of the two coaches on that app, and it's been amazing. So I'm happy to be here with
Fantastic.
it all.
Yeah, thank you so much. JD, if you want to chime in, you speak to a lot of students that are feeling a lot of that, the burnout sort of going into the GAMSAT as well. How do you sort of relate our conversation with what students are feeling today?
Great question, Chris. Great question, Christian. So, I mean, I think there are like multiple aspects to the student experience and their anxieties. I mean, like I think at the forefront of their anxiety is, at the moment, how do I do an exam that's online? Like, we've never done this GAMSAT thing online before, and that's what we've tried to kind of mitigate in our course since the announcement from ASA. But I suppose the anxiety of the unfamiliar, the anxiety of, getting a mark that's good enough to actually get in and to pursue the career that you've always wanted to pursue. I mean, like Christian and I have both been in that position ourselves. But then there's also like external anxieties. So anxieties, personal issues, anything going on in your life that might actually impact your study. So there are multiple aspects to it, and I think Leah has a lot to say to it.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, at the end of the day, and we've spoken about this quite a lot, but the GAMSAT is it's a psychometric test, and it is really playing on those, those biases that we have lurking in the background that we may not see. For example, if we aren't a very calm person, that does sort of come out when we're going through the questions, and we're really, needing to make very, very quick responses and draw quick conclusions that require a very balanced state of mind and very grounded, train of thought. And it's not something that you can just tap into for the exam. Like, it really does need to encompass your entire life, and only then will it actually be, exercised as we're going into the exam, which is a big, big powerful thing that, it's not a quick fix is the moral of the story here.
I also, just to add, I also find that it's really easy for students to fall into this spiral of negative thinking. Like, when they get a wrong answer, they'll just feed into this negative mindset that, I'm basically culminating into the thought that I'm a failure and I'm not going to be able to do, if I can't do this question, I can't do the next question, and then I can't do the GAMSAT. And it just it's a vicious cycle.
It is, and compound that with just the fear of potentially not going to become the doctor that you're striving to be. You've got this vision of I want to study medicine, but this constant fear is sort of holding you back in the background. No, awesome. Thank you for that, guys. I think what we'll do now is, so we've got our 4 major questions that we've collated, the common thread that we've been getting a lot of emails and a lot of questions about. So Leah, I think the first one that we're going to throw towards you is this one over here. We've got we've got a lot of anxiety and stress over things that we can't control. And I think the can't control is the big factor here. What are some of the things that you personally deal with, you know, these, I guess, just the stresses of things that are beyond our own reach?
Yeah, you know, what I've really been realizing over the course of my life, but also particularly having, once I became a meditator, was realizing that we are not in control of much in life. We have sometimes a perceived sense of being able to control a lot more than we can, but when it really comes down to it, we're never in control of what other people do or choose or how they behave, or for example, what's happening in the world. Largely out of our control, right? Other people's health, sometimes even our own health can sometimes be out of our own control. But what we can control is how we think, how we feel, and how we behave, how we respond to what's there in life. That is within our control. So when I feel like things are out of control in my life, what I tend to want to do, and what I find most people want to do, is grasp for what I can control. And sometimes that can lead us into feeling really wound up and rigid, and going down a spiral of anxiety. So what we can do in those moments, and what I've done to help me, is focus on what can I control right now. I can respond to this situation in a slightly different way. So if I can change, you know, what we can control is how we think, how we feel, how we behave. But if I can change how I think, I can change how I feel. And if I change how I feel, I can change how I behave and how I show up, how I'll respond to things like this test, for example.
Yeah,
How relaxed I'll be.
Sorry.
So, you know, when it comes to changing how we think in that moment, this is where having a mindfulness practice is going to be really helpful, because it's working on that level of changing how we think and respond to the things that show up in our life, by creating just a tiny bit of separation from perhaps the emotion that we might be feeling. So, you know, when we're feeling anxiety and stress, there's an excitation in our system. Physiologically, we feel it. It's very similar to excitement, but it's got this negative connotation to it. You know, our heart rate's increased, our blood pressure is higher, we might have racing thoughts, we might get sweaty. All of these things that could happen to someone who, actually, let me share a quote with you, because I found this to be a great example of this. Bruce Springsteen was being interviewed by Jay Leno back in the day, and Jay Leno asked him, what is going through your mind when you're behind stage and you're just getting ready to go out into that concert hall, and people are screaming and they're pounding and they're, you know, shaking the roof, and you hear all this noise, like, what's going through your mind? And he said, the craziest thing happens. My palms start to sweat, my heart races, my mind's going really fast, I'm breathing really heavy, and that's when I know I'm ready to rock. And I just love that, because I can look at that and say, that's a panic attack, dude. I felt that before. I know that feeling, and it doesn't feel good. But, you know, he has a different way of perceiving it. He's like, my body is excited, I'm ready to rock, I'm ready for this. And so I think fear always accompanies those things that, you know, we're uncertain about, when there's high stakes involved, when there's a lot expected of us. We put ourselves under so much pressure. But, you know, he was in that moment going, I feel ready. This is me being excited. So just changing and shifting the perspective on what you might even be feeling in your body, and then just, you know, really bringing your attention here. Okay, you know what? I do feel tightness in my chest. I do feel like I'm breathing heavily, but maybe that's not bad. Maybe it's just a sensation in my body. I can feel it. I can give space for it, and I can choose to still bring my attention to something that, you know, is positive about this. So for me, it's, you know, I have certain techniques I can share that have helped me with anxiety and stress. You know, one of them is very simple. Just breathe in for 5 seconds and exhale for 5 seconds. Do that for 5 minutes. There's been a lot of research teams around the world who have looked into this kind of breathing pattern and found that within 5 minutes, we can lower our body's fight or flight response, you know, that sympathetic nervous system. We can increase our body's relaxation response. And it's pretty powerful in 5 minutes, what a difference it can make. You can do it before your tests, but I recommend doing it every day leading up to that test, even twice a day. Practice this for 5 minutes while you're thinking about whatever your worries are about that test. Something called desensitization is when, you know, our bodies are always alternating between that sympathetic and parasympathetic response when we're in meditation, and we're trying to find the right balance for ourselves, because our body wants to be efficient and let go of things. But when we can practice staying calm and relaxed while we review the things that have some adrenaline painted around them, that's when we can learn how to shift the way that we'll respond to it in the moment when it actually happens. So you're practicing remaining calm while you go into that event. So I think that's a really important thing to do every day as you go up to this. Watch how it really shifts things for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I couldn't help but also remember on a previous live video you did with Afasu talking about humming as well to activate the parasympathetic nervous system as well. Could you speak a little bit about that? Oh,
it's a funny one. It's called buzzing bee breath or humming bee breath, and you can do it a couple different ways. Probably, you know, if you were out in public doing this, people might look at you like, oh, you're a weirdo. But you know, if you have no shame about it, go for it. But it's easy to do at home. You can just, you know, take one finger like this, and you can press into the little. Here, I'll show you the little soft part of my ear, the little cartilage area. And so you just take one finger on each side, just gently press the ears in. So you're plugging your ears. And then it's as simple as humming. You just take a breath in. You want to do that for at least 6 rounds and then pause for a moment. Breathe naturally. Notice if you feel a little calmer. Do it again. You can do that for a few rounds, maybe 3 to 5 rounds of six hums each. There's something really soothing about that practice on the nervous system, on the mind system. And, you know, they say even when you're feeling agitated and angry, that could be a good practice to do to sort of cool off some steam. But I made a joke. I think, you know, you might not want to do that when someone's talking to you. If they're making you angry and you start humming them out, that would be a little rude. But otherwise, it's a great practice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I could see how that could be taken as a bit of offense, especially in the actual exam itself. You know, with being online for the exam, there's basically somebody watching on the other end of the computer. They're watching through the webcam, and almost certain that the humming will set off the person that's watching to check if you're cheating in the exam. So, but no, yeah, it's really fantastic. I think you know, as you said, you know, to try to take these deep breaths. I've been really trying to train myself to get to that stage whenever there's like a little bit of like I guess any inkling of anxiety, because like as soon as you let it progress on its own, like you don't realize that, you know, it's an hour later and you're ruminating over this one little thing, and it's this like massive problem, and it's all encompassing in terms of your mind, and you can't really think straight. But like as soon as like to try to recognize when that's a feeling that's starting to, you know, creep up into your mind, and squash it there. Like, you know, the pressure is still going to be there, but as you were saying, you can change the way you're approaching that pressure. And if you're completely, you know, blinded by how big it is when it really isn't, you're not really going to help yourself long term.
Yeah, you know, we have the ability to train ourselves in practices like meditation to learn to just observe all those thoughts, all those fearful, worrisome thoughts or anxious thoughts. You know, anxiety, it means we're projecting ourselves into the future, into some imagined outcome. You know, I love that when it's saying fear is like creating imaginary scenarios that you don't want to happen. But what if we were to use a practice every day where we do the opposite, and we visualize yourself acing that exam, and going through it with ease, feeling relaxed, feeling calm, feeling relaxed in your body, feeling empowered, feeling confident, having courage, knowing, you know what, hey, I might get a couple of answers wrong, or I might get a few, or things might not work out exactly according to plan, but whenever in your life has always worked out according to plan. And sometimes I can look back at times when my life and I saw things didn't happen as I expected them to, and I really panicked and freaked out, and then come to find out it turned out to be just fine, or okay, or maybe sometimes even better than it would have before. Are folks doing this from their own homes then?
Yeah, so originally it was an exam that we would all go into the one venue, but now it is from home, and it is in front of a computer, and someone is watching through the webcam.
So, you know, perhaps there's a home base advantage to this. You know, in sports, they talk about that all the time. Teams seem to do better winning more games when they're on their home court than when they're out. So that's why they always do championships at a neutral court where nobody has the home base advantage. So, you know, in a way, the silver lining of this might be that there's a home base advantage of you being in an environment that you're comfortable in. Sometimes people get a lot of, you know, test anxiety going into a space with a lot of other people, and it's this amplified energy of everyone else's anxiety that you feel. So maybe being in your own home can even provide some advantages for that, to feel more relaxed.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I think this is a perfect segue into the next question. And that is, you know, so much has changed in recent times. How do we cope with the fear of uncertainty? So we're, I guess, a little bit different from before, where it's, you know, more so focused on dealing with the stress of what we can't control, but now it's more so the concern of things that we don't know. You know, this exam has been the same in the past for, you know, so many years, and it has been a very, I guess, black and white style of assessment that is separating us as pre-med to, you know, getting into medicine and pursuing, you know, the goals that we're after, and ensuring that all the years of previous study, you know, are amounting to something that we actually want. But now the landscape has changed, you know, so much, and it hasn't been done before, and we don't have a lot of guidance, you know, going forward. And that's starting to impact, you know, our thinking towards the exam, because it's almost like we don't have a safety net to hold on to. We don't have people that have gone through it in the past. You know, we don't have a lot of, I guess, almost like previously worked out skills that we know for certain will work for us 100%. And so it's almost like we all have the intention of doing well, but the make or break is whether we go about it the right way. And there's a lot of like uncertainty there, and fear surrounding that. So for things that, like, you know, that we don't know, how can we train our thinking in regards to that?
Yeah, you know, I have this feeling that the doctors coming out of this situation right now that are emerging, and all of you watching, are developing certain qualities of character that the people before you didn't potentially be able to develop, because they didn't have these situations to overcome and get through. So there's a certain resilience and leadership qualities that are going to arise out of this. As saying, I'm going to take leadership of my own thoughts and my own feelings. I'm going to move through this uncertainty, and the quality of character that's going to arise from that is pretty incredible. It will serve you well in your career. So I think this is, as much as this is a challenge, this is also a really incredible opportunity for every single one of us to grow tremendously through this. Through, you know, we went through this time of great uncertainty, and there wasn't a predisposed plan that we were just following. So this is like a whole wave of mavericks and courageous people that are moving through this right now. So I just acknowledge every single one of you. But the fear of uncertainty, you know, there's always going to be fear of uncertainty, because we we never really know what's going to happen. We can, like I said before, we can imagine that our plan, but what our plan is usually not the plan that actually happens. Life has a way of bringing us lots of curveballs, and this is certainly one of them. But you know, Elizabeth Gilbert is a really incredible author. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she wrote a book called Big Magic, talking about the creative process and what it takes to be a writer. And really anyone that wants to achieve or accomplish something is going to experience fear showing up. And she said, write a letter to your fear. You know, if it's really strong there, just write out a letter, be like, hey, fear, I realize that you feel like you have a job to do, and it's to protect me from, you know, getting hurt or being humiliated or falling on my face, whatever it is you're trying to protect me from. I know you take your job really seriously, and you do your job very well. But thank you for that. I appreciate what you're trying to do for me. I see it's all with good intentions, but you know what? I've got this. I'm a resourceful human being who has lots of tools available to me. I have lots of wisdom and knowledge. I'm not a 5-year-old girl or boy anymore. You know, where some of our fear originally, you know, might have come from is way back in childhood. Maybe we fell on our face in front of kids on the playground, and or we failed at something as a kid, or we were humiliated. Who knows what it was? But you know, we tend to develop these defense mechanisms as adults that come from childhood that are here to protect us. And in situations like this, when there's uncertainty popping up, that protector comes out as fear and is like, uh-oh, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And you better not do this wrong. And so we feel that side of us pretty strongly. And if we can just step back and say, hey, you know, this is a part of me, but it's not all of me. And I can just detach myself a little bit from it, and I can just observe that it's there. I may not overcome it completely. It may not ever go away. It will always show up when there's times of uncertainty, but I can know the difference between that being me and that just being something here that I can say thank you and put it in the back seat. Like, you are steering and driving this ship, and that little, you know, co-pilot back there, wannabe co-pilot back there, can take a back seat, and we have the power to do that. We have the power to witness what's there and say, okay, you're here, I acknowledge you, thank you, and then continue to move forward. That's courage.
Yeah, I love that. I think that really overlaps with like the whole control thing, because there's like uncertainty and control, or a lack of control, come hand in hand, because you know, you don't have control over everything. If you did, you could guarantee certainty, you could guarantee whatever you want to come about. And I think it's super important, as you said, to, you know, what can you get in control of? Your thoughts. And you can think, well, okay, it's normal, it's okay for me to be feeling a certain fear, but it's more like an acknowledgement of it and not a fear of the fear, because then that gets you in the mud, stuck in the mud, basically. So yeah, I really love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. We had a class not too long ago where I guess we were devising different ways to ensure that as we are specifically going through the exam, we're still making very sound logical inferences, and we're not being bogged down by things that aren't actually true. And one of the tactics that we spoke about was, as we're moving on to a different question, quite often what can impact our I guess focus and ability to ensure that our logic is correct is bringing in the baggage from the previous question into the new question that is, you know, completely separated from what we've gone through before. And one of the tips that we spoke about was, you know, taking a breath before we go into that new question and just observing the thoughts that we're having, you know, not trying to stifle them, not trying to change them, just thinking about the thoughts that are going on, thinking about the feelings, understanding how they're impacting us right now. And like you said, just acknowledging that they're there before we dive into the next thing.
Yeah, because what's in the light and no longer in the shadow is there. It's not ruling us. Usually what's ruling us is what we haven't acknowledged and witnessed. So We don't realize we're having those thoughts. It's definitely ruling us. I love that. Taking a breath before the next question, feeling the contact that your body is making with the surface beneath you, your feet on the floor, feeling your breath in your body, letting just thoughts come and go, you know, like you can't necessarily stop your thoughts. Like that's a big misconception when it comes to meditation or mindfulness, is that we're supposed to, you know, the success is when we stop the thoughts, but it's really about the success is when we're allowing the flow of thoughts to just come and go, and we're not reacting to them. We're not diving so deep into that storyline that we get lost in it. We have the ability to just observe it and, you know, maybe engage with it for a moment if there's some fear around it or some stress around it, and just say thank you, and, you know, send ourselves a little compassion and a little warmth for that, and then we bring our attention into what we need to with those grounded deep breaths. So in meditation, your practice of meditation's training you for that. Every single time you're activating your body's relaxation response, and we do it in thousands of different ways. So it's just finding the way that works best for you. If that's bringing your attention to your breath or bringing your attention through your body, we do something called a body scan, where you just feel the top of your head, you feel your forehead, your eyes, your nose, move your awareness all the way down your body. Just feel every single part one by one for a few seconds. Very, very, very relaxing, very grounding. May be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I think now is the perfect time that I wanted to make a brief aside to the app that you and Afasu do coach so many people around the globe. For everybody that's watching, Leah did not ask me to put this in. This was whether she agreed or not. This was going to go into this webinar regardless. So yeah, like I said, I've been using this for a couple of months now, and for those that haven't heard of it before, what they do in the app is I like to see it in two parts. And Leah, you might view it a little bit differently, but the first part for me is what pops up on the home screen when you go into the app, and that is your daily sort of course. And so you go through every day, you go through this guided meditation. Before you start the app, you choose what's important to you, and whether it be mood, whether it be stress, whether it be gratitude, and so on. And basically it personalizes those daily courses to what you're wanting. And every so often there'll be a number of questions, just checking in with how you're engaging with the content. And then if you're struggling with, say, the body scan that Leah was talking about, it will peel back a little bit and explain it in almost a different way, or try to re-engage you with the body scan and show you how beneficial it can be, and to ground your thinking and so on. So that's like the first part of the app that is the daily. It does progress as you go on. But then the second part is what you're seeing over here, and this is the guided meditations that are specific for how you're feeling at that point in time. And so, whether it be, middle of the day and you've noticed that you're losing a bit of focus or a little bit of momentum, you click into that, daily reset. And in that, guided meditation, it will go through, tactics to almost bring you back to the state that you were in the morning when you were really focused and really rested. And so it's prolonging that time. There are a number of other things. To be frankly honest, the idea to get balance on board with this webinar came after I did the creativity segment of this singles, and the guided meditation at that point was thinking of all the different ways you can use just a plain cardboard box, and just that simple tactic was really astounding to extend your mind from just the specifics of, hey, I've got work, I've got uni, I've got to study for this. It's just tapping into a little bit of out the box sort of thinking, which we spoke about this not long ago in one of the webinars as well. This exam is trying to tap into those higher order thinkings of problem solving and creativity. And if you are stifled by a lot of stresses, you can't tap into that. And so ensuring that you go into this this high academic question and exam with a very open and clear mind is what's, you know, really important to tap into those higher order skills to ensure that your logic is there, and, you know, ensure that you do have this element of creativity that, you know, the GAMSAT is after. So that's how I see the app. You know, we've got the daily, we've got the very specific things, you know, how we're feeling at a given moment. Leah, did you want to talk a little bit about the app? How did this go with Afasu, you know, creating this? Because there's a lot of work that's been put into it.
It is. In fact, the team, the Elevate team, has another app called Elevate, which helps you increase your IQ through various brain games, and they had such success with helping people with that. You know, over 23 million people use that app, that they said, we really want to help people with stress and sleep and anxiety. And so their team went to work on it for a few years to develop the technology behind this app, which is quite different than the other meditation apps out there today. And then Ofasu and I came on board later on as the coaches. So we worked together with them to create a personalized experience for everyone. So you answer questions, and then right in real time, it sort of spits out a meditation for you that is personalized for you based on your answers, which could be different than the next person that does the app. So it's the closest thing we could come to solving the solution of how do I work with a meditation teacher when I don't have access to one right here in my, you know, right now. So we're trying to solve that problem through this app. So I'm a little biased, of course, because I'm a part of the team, but I love it. And it's helping a lot of people right now, which makes me very happy.
It honestly, like, it couldn't have come at a better time. You know, a lot of people are, you know, needing that sort of guided element, but, you know, we're so far away from the rest of the world. So, you know,
I just want to say, because there's some questions coming through, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
for sure.
it's only on iPhone at the moment in the Apple Store, but by the end of this year, it will be on Android and Google. So just hold tight. But, you know, if anybody here is listening and wants to, I can send some meditations to you guys. If you don't have an iPhone and you want some, it might be my own personal meditations, a little different than the balance, but.
Awesome. That'll be fantastic. We'll make sure to follow that up with an email to everybody. Thank you for that, Leah. Before we move on from the app, I like to, I guess I like to view this app as, if you guys have seen Bandersnatch on Netflix, where there's so many different outcomes that are possible, and every single time you make a choice, it changes the way it's going about it, and that's really the personalized aspect that is really handy here. You know, you don't go into the app for a week on you know, for a specific single meditation, and you come back and it knows that you haven't gone in for a week, and it peels it back a little bit, and it says, okay, you know, we haven't seen you for a while, you know, let's revisit this because you might have forgotten. So yeah, really awesome stuff. Thank you, Leah. Cool. So just moving on to the next question now. Okay, so the GAMSAT has changed into a format I can't really connect with. How is it that we can maintain focus? You know, just like, you know, the majority of the world, we've all moved like online now anyway, and there's nothing really tangible anymore. You know, when we're studying, we're not studying with people. When we're doing the questions, we're not doing them on paper. We've lost this sort of connection with the way we traditionally went about it with the GAMSAT. So what are some of the ways that we can maintain that? Like, it's so easy to, you know, we're doing work online and bam, there's another tab, and we're, you know, like 5 pages down through Facebook, and, you know, we're onto some, like, learning a recipe for goodness knows what. But like, how do we ensure that, you know, as we're going, because it's one thing to, I guess, train yourself to not be distracted, but I think it's another thing to be totally entwined with the work that you're doing. And I think there's a difference there. You know, you can do a lot of things to curb the distractions around you. You can isolate yourself. You can, you know, put blocks on your computer for websites and so on. But the focus that we're trying to go for is this real connection with the work that we're doing, and tunnel vision, where, you know, it really is all encompassing. How do we go about that, you know, in this exam layout?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that there's any one particular right answer to this, but I'll do my best. I think that what you were discussing is eliminating distractions is, of course, a very important aspect of this, because when we are online, we have the tendency to want to go onto social media and other websites and things. So we've kind of been training our brains to do that for a while on our devices. So this is a little bit of retraining your brain. It might be helpful when you think about, okay, well, in what environments am I the most focused and in a flow state? You know, because I think you're talking about that tunnel vision, meaning flow state. You know, I have the proper amount of difficulty here to make it challenging, and I'm not bored, but it's not so challenging that I'm overwhelmed. So like when we can find that right little medium, we get into the flow state. So maybe setting up the space in your home, you know, maybe you would dress a certain way when you'd go into a classroom setting. Maybe you dress that way. You know, you can sort of shift your brain into thinking it's in a different place when you take those measures. You know, set up your office space in your home. You can even, like you said, do those blocks for websites. But I think it's that, the eliminating the distractions, but also when we're training focus in areas like mindfulness and meditation, one of the things I like to say is most people, probably most of you watching this, actually don't have problems with focusing. Because if you did have problems with focusing, it would have probably been very difficult to get to the point where you're all at right now. So, you know, when you're reading a news article, or you're scrolling through a Instagram feed, or you're enveloped in a book and you're in the middle of a busy cafe or somewhere, you can be completely enveloped in the thing it is that you're paying attention to. Meanwhile, there's all these distractions and things happening all around. Why is that? You know, you watch a Netflix show you're really involved in, and you can be fully in it. Doesn't matter if there's other things going on around, because we're interested in it. So it's training yourself to be interested in something that maybe before you found to be a little dry or uninteresting. So when we're training our focus in meditation, we're finding new ways to be interested in something that is everyday, like breathing. Hey, that might be boring for a lot of people, like I'm breathing in and breathing out. But if you can ask the question, what is it that I love about my breath? Like, how does it feel when I take a deep breath in? The sense of fullness that I have. How does it feel when my body finally gets to release it? Feels really good. And you start to notice like what I enjoy about my breath, then suddenly it becomes this very interesting thing that's easy to pay attention to. So it's a nice, I don't want to call it trick necessarily, but it's a nice way of shifting to going from just kind of coldly observing something and getting bored with that, and then our attention drifts off to something else, to I'm really interested in this. So naturally my attention's going to flow there. I'm going to find myself in more of a flow state with it. So how can you find what this is happening right now with being in a new format, to be shift it into, instead of it being an irritation or I don't like this change, to this is a new opportunity or challenge for you to grow and to learn something new, to develop some new skills, to really put yourself to the test, so to speak, you know, to grow from this. And I think when we can find like, what is it that's interesting about this for you, that might be helpful for you. It may or may not be helpful, but you know, if you start to develop like an everyday meditation practice that's training your attention towards something, those little subtle soft skills are what's helpful in these moments of, okay, I can just be centered here and pay attention to what's in front of me, and really dive in without worrying about all the other things going on around me. So again, it's a shift in perspective.
Yeah, awesome. Another question, if you don't mind me asking, that bridges off this. you spoke about like having a lot of interest in the thing that you're doing in order to maintain that focus. Part of the problem with, and this isn't specific for the GAMSAT this time around, but in previous years as well, even when it has been online, there's a lot of, whether we acknowledge it or not, there's quite often many feelings of resent and anger towards this exam, because, you know, many of us have sat it multiple times. It is quite costly. You know, it takes 4 months of our time roughly, you know, to prepare for it. Quite often we have to sacrifice work. We have to sacrifice, you know, time with friends, and you know, our summer, and it impacts even our university studies, which paradoxically isn't even related to this exam. And so as we're going through this exam, you know, there's quite often underlying feelings of anger, because this exam almost feels like it's stealing our dreams away from us, to wanting to be able to enter the career that we want. And it's like this huge barrier into entering, you know, the healthcare profession and becoming a doctor. And so when we are going through, you know, the study for this, those feelings of resent sort of boil up and can impede on our focus as well. So how would you go about those feelings of resent when it's, you know, you want the outcome, but the process is infuriating?
Yeah. That's a good question too. You know, what ways can we channel that frustration in a healthy way? Because, you know, taking it out on the exam while we're doing it, typing really angrily, and it feeling like we're fuming isn't going to help anybody. I mean, the computer doesn't care. It has no, it's not a sentient being that's gonna feel that anger and say, oh, I'm so sorry, you know. So really, it's, you know, we're holding on to something that only really eats away at us inside. And this goes back to your question about like, how do I accept the things I cannot change? It comes down to finding, just where can I find a little bit of acceptance with this? Like, anger can be a very natural response to all the things you just said would make any right-minded person angry. So that's certainly an okay natural human emotion to feel. I'm not saying don't feel angry or judge yourself for those feelings. Certainly feel what you need to feel. And this may sound a little strange, but throw a little temper tantrum in your room. This always helps me. This is a little bit more coaching than it is meditation, to be honest, to what I'm sharing right now. But when you see a child, like a toddler, that doesn't get something their way, and they don't like the process, they don't like what's happening, and they don't fully understand, it doesn't make sense to them, they throw a temper tantrum. And that comes to screaming and crying and crocodile tears and, you know, big loud outbursts. We've all seen it. Maybe you have a kid and you've experienced it firsthand. But eventually, give it a couple moments, that child will start to just go into the sobbing. And it's going to look for something to self-soothe. It's going to look for a blanket or its parent or a teddy bear, whatever it is, going to start to self-soothe itself. And with a couple more moments of the self-soothing, it's going to pass. And then suddenly that kid's okay and it's running off and playing and on to the next thing. So as children, we knew how to do this. We knew how to let that wave of intensity crest and naturally release, but it's not socially acceptable to do that as adults. So we don't want to throw a temper tantrum in public, but when we're in the comfort of our own homes, you know, the advantage to that right now is you have a pillow, you know, in your living room or in your bedroom. Go to town on that thing. Just scream, cry, beat up your pillow, throw a few good punches, try not to throw out your shoulder, you know. If you have other people living in the house, scream into your pillow and close the door and do what you need to do to, in a healthy way, release that frustration and those emotions, because it's totally natural that you're feeling that way. You don't have to like the situation, but you have the ability to release that frustration, which is in your control. So that way you can get through this thing, and you can show up without all of that festering inside of you, because it's going to ping pong inside and create more stress, more resistance. You're not going to be able to think really clearly when you've got all that pent up inside. So just like let some of that steam out, as you start to feel these waves of emotions about this. And I guarantee you're going to feel better. Your tears might come. Say whatever you need to say. It doesn't have to be PC or politically correct. Nobody's going to hear you. Release all of that, and you see how you feel a lot better afterwards. And you might get a little bit closer every time to feeling, I accept this. It is what it is. I don't necessarily love it. I wouldn't have chosen it, but I can get through this, and I can do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That I know you and Afasa really spoke about that not too long ago. I think the acceptance that was the common theme there is really, really powerful. It's, things aren't how I want it, and it's not ideal, but that's the way it is right now, and nothing will benefit me if I get caught up, over the things that I don't enjoy. And bringing it back to the original question, I think, letting go of that resentment towards, GAMSAT, towards, ASA, the process, and really does sort of, put things into perspective. And, you even though that's not a direct tactic to try to maintain focus, at least you're not bringing in that baggage as you're going through the exam and your studies. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And if you don't feel like that's doable for you, meditation practice can help too. But when feelings are intense like that, I say you got to go sometimes to those extremes, and it's a great release. I've done it myself. More than one occasion.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And we'll move on to the final big question before the Q&As. This one here, the exam has been drawn out over so many months. It was, it was promised at the end of March. We're in May now, and it still hasn't happened. We've sacrificed so much time, as I was saying before. Before this event, I'm losing my drive. How do I get back my motivation? How do I get back the initial flair that brought me to this point that I feel like has just been depleted out of me throughout this entire process?
Yeah. What I want to say is the majority of people I know right now have lost a significant amount of motivation and lack of drive. And it's not isolated to just you guys here. This is a global thing happening across the board with most people, with rare exceptions. Even the most motivated people I know, I'm a very motivated person, and I found myself feeling like a couch potato, like just really, why do I have this fatigue and lethargy and all these things showing up? Globally, we're dealing with waves of stages of grief as we're grieving the loss of the life that we knew, the connection with people, the ability to do things in person, to go to group events, to maybe you had, your income affected and families affected, and so much happening right now. We're trying to cope with it. And so all of our energy resources are going towards that and more survival, and less towards like, how do I thrive? And let's move forward and be motivated. So don't beat yourself up for feeling that way. This is happening everywhere. And I'm sure it doesn't help that this test has had changes, but I don't think it's limited to just that's causing this for everybody. So I just want to say that. But how do we get back motivation in times like this? I think some of the tips that has been helping me and some people I know right now is get enough sleep at night, because your sleep is going to help you recover from all the stress that you're dealing with on this day-to-day. So if you're getting enough sleep at night, sleep more than you might normally need to. If you need to sleep 9 hours a night or more, do what you need to do. Definitely make sure you're getting enough sleep. I know that simple things like using colors to can help activate parts of the brain that get you more excited. So, you know, if that means putting up a board on your house, which is going to have your goals on it written in different colors, like, what am I doing this for? Connect with the why. Why am I doing all of this? Why am I putting all this energy into my school, into my career, into becoming a doctor, into going through this exam? Like, what am I doing this for? Connect again with that why, because you have it. And there's a little exercise that I've done before in the past where I write that down, like, you know, why am I doing this? Well, I want to be a doctor. Well, why do I want to be a doctor? Well, I want to help people. Well, why do I want to help people? Because I don't want people to feel suffering. Why don't I want people to feel suffering? Well, because I felt suffering before and I didn't, you know. So you can start to really dig down to what's the most deepest, most personal reason for you for doing this. Reconnect to that. Put it on in big, bold colors, green, blue, orange. Put it up in your house and look at that every day. And remind yourself, like, why am I here doing this? Because there's going to be more than just this hump that you're going to experience in the course of your career. You're going to go, you know, look what people are experiencing right now in hospitals, like never before, unprecedented, having to make difficult decisions, having to deal with scenarios. And so this is maybe one of multiple times in your life where you're going to have you're going to deal with a lot of uncertainty, and you're going to question, like, what am I doing this for? So reconnecting to that why is going to be really important for you.
That's amazing. You've when it comes to the interviews, which is the next step after the GAMSAT, we speak about the rationale behind the typical question which is why do you want to study medicine? And you've targeted really profoundly. You know, one of the key things that the examiners are looking for is, you know, how basically when the going gets tough in your training, and you know you are working a schedule that you don't want to work, and you've had to sacrifice this and that, are you going to have the flair to be able to keep going? Are you going to have that motivation to continue on doing what you want to do despite everything around you not being how you want it to be right now? Do you have are the reasons why you want to do medicine so ingrained with who you are that will push you forward into continuing your studies? And yeah, I think you've really, you know, linked that back to the GAMSAT as well, and showed us that, you know, this is in order to find that motivation, we do need that self-awareness and checking in with, you know, who we are and what we want in life. Yeah, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, there's always a more deeply personal reason behind our why than we ever think. Even when people choose careers because, you know, it's financially stable, and they think, well, that's the reason why I'm choosing this career. I'll always be okay. I'll always be secure. But behind that, when you really dig down, it's always even more than money, even more than social acknowledgement. There's a deeply personal reason. Maybe that security allows you the ability to have a family, to take care of the people that you love. Maybe you don't want to see your parents suffer in the future. You want to take care of them. So there's always deeply personal reasons behind everything, and it's important to remind ourselves of that of time to time. Like, yeah, I have to do it too, because I hit roadblocks a lot as a teacher, and I have moments where I'm like, oh, did I make the right choice? Am I doing the right thing? You know, where's this all going? And I have to remember why I did this, and what I really see is the vision for my life and how this fits in with that.
Awesome. JD, I saw you wanted to say something before.
It was because it was due to a question that came up on the topic of the why, like considering the why, and it was about how you can potentially actually become more anxious because you think of it actually in the negative way, like, well, why am I doing this for? Why am I putting myself through this? But so I guess like the question the students asking is, how can I overcome that negative way of looking at it as opposed to the positive why? It's a bit hard.
Yeah, well, I think when you're really digging into the answer, when you just ask that question, like, why am I doing this? When we're asking that question with like that throwing our hands up in the air kind of response, like, oh, we're focusing on the problems. We're not actually thinking about the why. That might be a rhetorical question. We're just asking, like, why am I doing this? You know, this is so stressful. But when we really answer the question, why am I doing this? You know, what do I want for me? What do I want for my life? What do I want for the lives of those I love and I care about? How does this fit into that? How is me getting through this exam and becoming a doctor, doing the things that I know I'll be doing, how does that fit into my vision for my life and what I'd like for me, what I'd like to feel, what I want for my loved ones, what I want for my community, what I see for the world. You know, how does this fit into that? And that's answering the question. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. All right. So just before we jump into the Q&As that JD has been furiously writing down and collating into broad topics, just make sure that you are aware of the dates going into the application season. It feels like the applications have been brought forward because the GAMSAT has been pushed back. So just make sure you're aware of those. Come along to one of the application webinars that we have. There aren't too many remaining, so you can jump into one that isn't part of your own university, and just make sure that you do have all those dates ready to go. So yeah, on the Fraser's interview training website, you can jump into those. All right, Q&A time. JD, I'll let you take control of this one.
Yeah, no problems. Okay, so we did have a couple questions on like right at the start on routines for like becoming calm and all that, but I think you covered that really well with all those breathing techniques and the bee humming, buzz humming thing, which I will definitely do.
Yeah, just a few, there's like a recap, you know, breathe in and out for 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Do that for 5 minutes. That's one, very simple. And it's only 6 breaths a minute. It's really not much. Second, humming, deep breath, do that. Hums and pause, do it again. So 3 rounds. And then the third one would be a body scan. Your attention from the top of your head down through your leg, or you can start at your feet and go up. Either way works fine. It might only take 5 minutes to do that. It can be deeply calming and grounding, and sometimes bringing our attention into our body helps us get out of the mind a little bit. Maybe you don't like that one. You can just pay attention to what you love about your breath for a couple moments. So those are a few I've shared.
Awesome. I think they're really good tips. I do the deep breathing one on a regular, and it's changed a lot ever since I learned about it. So highly recommend. Beautiful. Okay, so in terms of another question, so this goes back to something I mentioned earlier about how a lot of students end up lacking in self-confidence because they'll get a question wrong, and they might get many questions wrong, especially in their practice, and so they feel like a failure, or that they will fail. So any tips on overcoming a lack of self-confidence in that regard?
Lack of self-confidence. Notice where your mind's going into those thoughts. Like when we tend to do, it's called catastrophic thinking. We call it in psychology, and it tends to be one of the ways that we warp reality. We have a different perception of what's true, and one of them is maximizing the worst scenario in our heads. And I do it. Most of us tend to do it. But notice before you go into this every day, just notice the times when you tend to go into the worst case scenario, the most catastrophic thinking. A simple way to practice that is to write down a couple of events that you tend to not like say I get an answer wrong on a test. That could be one. Write out the example of that. Or, someone says something to me I don't like, or I feel judged. Write out a couple of events that tend to make you feel those kind of insecure feelings or low self-esteem. After you've written out the event, then write out under each one, what is it that I feel emotionally when this happens? Does it make me feel sad? Does it make me feel angry? Do I feel frustrated? Like really connect to what am I feeling in my body when that happens? And then answer, how do I behave when that happens? And then finally, the fourth one, answer, what is the automatic thinking that I go into when this happens? Like, what are the thoughts that go through my head? And it's important to sometimes write these down, because the simple act of writing it down, the actual thoughts we have, you might be shocked to find out how critical, like criticizing you can be towards yourself. When I've done this exercise, and I just did it yesterday towards something because I wanted to examine my thoughts around something. And I was shocked at my own thinking. And I thought, wow, I really went to the worst case scenario on this. And that doesn't make it's not true. Right? So we tend to do this. And when we can put it out on paper and we can really see it for what it is, we can go, wow, I don't need to be such a bully to myself. I can be so mean to my own self. I would never talk to a friend that way. I would never tell a friend that missed an answer on a question, you're going to fail at this. You're a failure. See, you'll never get things right. Everything's going to shit. Like whatever it is that the thoughts go in the head, like write out the string of conversation that you want to have with yourself. If you were to imagine right now getting answers wrong on the test, like what you'd be telling yourself, what you'd be feeling. It's no surprise that we feel horrible when we tell ourselves those things. So sometimes just having the awareness around what we speak to ourselves we can catch in the moment when we say it again. We can go, I remember you, pesky little thought. I know what you're doing, but hey, I know that's not true. So it doesn't mean that we suddenly may wave a magic wand and those thoughts don't happen anymore. It's that we're developing awareness around the thoughts that we do have, and we're catching it when it shows up again, and we're like, thank you, but that's not actually true. I know what's happening here.
So would that mean in the case of failing once, or like failing the GAMSAT, the whole exam once, or getting a whole question wrong, that kind of thing, that having happened, and then the fear, the thing that's like causing a lack of self-confidence is the fear of getting other questions wrong and failing the next exam, and rather than feeding into that catastrophic thinking, because at the end of the day it hasn't happened, it's not true, there's no, like, you have not failed the next GAMSAT, rather than doing that, writing out those thoughts and feelings, and then realizing that you're essentially being a bully to yourself, and like peel that back. Is there like what's the next step there once you've acknowledged it?
Yeah, I mean, recognizing there's absolutely no correlation between I got this answer wrong, which means I'm going to get the next answer wrong, because it's a completely different question. So, the only reason why that there would be a correlation between that is because suddenly we worked ourselves up into a fear around this one, or we suddenly felt shame, or we felt bad about ourselves, and that motion circulating inside and all those negative thoughts that we've just created about ourselves and the judgments that we placed on ourselves or on the test or on the administrator of the test starts to block us from being able to think clearly. And then, potentially we might not be able to answer questions as well as we would before, because we're clogged up by we've gotten our own way. So we got to get out of our own way with this and go, okay, that is what it is. Blank slate, start again. And it's just always bringing yourself right here into the here and now. Like, be present. Don't project into the future of the worst case scenario, what's going to happen next and what's going to happen 10 years from now. My whole life's going downhill because I didn't answer this question. Like this, that's not helpful. And it's not true. So you have to bring yourself into the present moment and fresh start. what just happened 2 seconds ago when you submitted that question and then maybe you got it wrong, that's in the past. You're starting your right now. You're grounding in with your body. You're feeling your breath. Calm yourself. Just like Christian said, take a breath before the next question. Wipe the slate clean. Notice those thoughts. Say thank you. Let them the next one. That's the best answer I can give you right now. And besides, the more you can practice doing this before the test happens, the easier it's going to be to do it in a moment. Because when we're under pressure, it's harder to remember those tools. So practice this beforehand. And that's something you can do with meditation, mindfulness practices beforehand.
I think that's a great answer. Thank you, Leah. I suppose this next question you could use one could use all the techniques that you've already talked about, but more specifically, a lot of students feel the stress of a time factor, in the sense that it's like time's running out for them, either because they may still be young, but they've tried the GAMSAT for like 4 years and they're not getting anywhere, and they feel like, okay, I really want to be a doctor, but maybe I should pursue something else because this is probably not this probably isn't for me if I keep failing, that kind of thing. And then there are mature age students who actually want to, they feel like time's running out because they're getting older. They feel like that there's no point pursuing the goal anymore past a certain point, because there is a possibility that you don't get the score that you want in the GAMSAT, and so on and so forth. So the question was, how can we conquer that fear? And I think it does touch on things we've already talked about, but anything specific?
I could always say you're never too old to become successful at something, but it's what we really believe about ourselves, and not what anybody else tells us that's important. But there's something I remember that Thomas Edison, he created, I don't know how many inventions and patents, thousands of, and he invented the light bulb, and he thought he was too stupid at first to learn anything, and he was fired from jobs, and he tried 1,000 times to unsuccessfully attempting to invent the light bulb before he actually did. And that's some real perseverance. And that's I think is interesting. And one out of many, many, many incredible examples of, you think about all the incredible artists and writers and authors and inventors and successful business people today. I mean, if you were to really read up the bios of the people who you admire, you would find that almost every single one of them came up with many, many failed attempts at businesses, many failed attempts at things, or they thought they were too old, or there's so many examples of this today. But it's the difference between the people who cave into that and say, all right, I'm just going to give up, and those who have more of a growth mindset that really succeed eventually. So I think it's important to know that just because we haven't done it yet doesn't mean that we won't. That's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset's I can't change. The evidence shows that this is what's true. And then the growth mindset says, I can change. Neuroplasticity. I can change my mind. I can change my behavior. I can change my personality with time, based on how I think and feel and behave. So I think it's just important to find those examples in real life and to inspire ourselves to say, if this person can do it, I can do it.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I think an interesting question is whether, because we're talking a lot about optimism, essentially, we're trying to rewire our brains, we're trying to rethink negative thoughts so that they're positive. Is there such a thing as being overly optimistic, and is that necessarily a bad thing?
To be overly optimistic?
Yeah. Or can you fall into that trap in doing these strategies?
Gosh, I can't think of any reasons why being really optimistic would be a bad thing. You know, there's a difference between being optimistic and being arrogant, or you know, having a lot of ego. I would say, you know, maybe that's not that helpful, but being optimistic I think can only really help us in these situations. And I don't think we're at risk of worrying about being overly optimistic here. If we're coming from the baseline of being afraid and being in fear, I really don't think you have to worry, am I going to get too optimistic if I do these practices? You're going to find a nice baseline, a nice healthy baseline to be in. So don't give into the fear about being too overly optimistic with something. You're not going to lose touch with reality. You're not going to become a head in the clouds person that's you know, has warped thinking. When we're optimistic, we tend to experience more things in life that amplify that positivity. Like, you walk into a room and you smile at somebody, they're going to smile back at you usually. I mean, unless you're in, you know, a country where that's considered strange. But there's an effect that being positive has on everybody else. Like, I just made the two of you smile. Hopefully you're watching this and you just smiled. But if I walk into a room and I'm grumpy and I'm pissed off, I'm upset, and I'm going to affect the energy of everybody else around me too. They're going to feel it. They're going to say, oh, I don't know how to respond to that. So I'm going to get two different things back from the world. I'm going to experience two different things back from life based on what I'm putting out. I'm going to create my own reality from how I'm projecting myself to others. So when we're in a positive mindset, we tend to see more positivity back. When we're in a negative mindset, we tend to see more negative things back. I like the quote, "You will always find the evidence for what you choose to believe. You will always find the evidence for what you choose to believe." And I live by that quote a lot, because we do. If you think things are going to fail for you, if you think that you're not good enough, if you think that things are going downhill, you're going to find evidence for that. You're going to go, see, I knew it. But if you think, and you turn your thinking around and you say, you know what? I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, or I might have failed a couple times before. That's fine. But I know that I can accomplish something with this. I know I'm going somewhere with this. I know that things are going to work out for me in time. And you can just shift the belief that you have around what's going to happen. You're going to find the evidence for that, and you're going to help yourself in the situation.
Leah, just something that what you're talking about really has infiltrated advice that we've gotten recently from one of our great tutors, Sadiq. He introduced us to, I think it was the Parkinson's theory of completing tasks. And basically what happens is you can complete a task within the time that you set for it. And so if you say to yourself, you know, I'm going to, you know, finish this essay in 2 hours, you'll finish it in 2 hours. If you say it's going to take me the whole day, it will take you the whole day. And you know, the power of the mindset that you're talking about, there's a lot of different ways in which it does infiltrate our tasks.
I love that. We're capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
It's true. JD, I think we have time for one last question.
So hard, because they just came like flooding in. Let's see which would be a good one to finish on. I suppose, okay, so one that's caught my attention is a question on how do you stop comparing yourself to others and prevent, like how do you prevent that from feeding into another negative spiral? Because a lot of the time there's something we actually haven't talked about is competition. At the end of the day, this is a competition in reality. So is there a way we can stop ourselves from comparing ourselves to others and rather like focus on ourselves and like sort of have faith in our own trajectory?
I think we all struggle with this a little bit, right? I know they were saying they did some research on social media, for example, and found that, of all the social media platforms, Instagram makes people feel the worst. Why? Because we compare ourselves to everybody else's perfect lives, and everyone else has it all together. They've got it more figured out than me, or they're happier than me. Their food looks better than mine, whatever. So we all struggle with this, comparing ourselves. And I think it's something we just have as an instinct of looking around us and seeing, where should I be compared to others in my head, But we're all starting from different starting points too. We think that that's a fair playing field, but we don't see other people's advantages that they have, or we don't see other people, maybe other people's struggles behind the scenes. I don't know if any of you practice yoga, but it just as an example, my husband and I teach yoga as well. And he always says in his class, the person who can do the most advanced pose doesn't mean they're happier than you. So what are we basing, the sign of success on? Is it what somebody else is making, or how fast they're achieving something relative to us, or, whatever prestige they have? It doesn't mean that person is more evolved, more mature, more happy than you. We really, really don't know the status of what's going on in another person's life or their health. So what we're tending to do is just telling ourselves that we're not good enough. And we're using their example of looking at that person to reconfirm some belief that we already have about ourselves, that we don't measure up in some way. So what we're trying to do is really achieve some level of awareness around what beliefs we have around ourselves. And they're called limiting beliefs because they limit us from being able to experience the joy that we want to experience. Because even when we do achieve something, we might not feel joy from it because we still have that belief inside. So it doesn't matter how far we get, what we accomplish, what we achieve, until we work on our relationship to ourselves and what we believe around ourselves, it's never going to feel like enough. There's always going to be somebody doing more, somebody doing better, something more innovative. There's always something we can compare it to. And it just never ends until we work on the relationship that I have with me. And recognize, what, I'm okay where I'm okay to just be here right now. I have permission to just be where I'm at. And anybody else's time schedule and time frame of their life is completely different than my life. We can trust that the timing of what's happening in our own life is perfect for us in some way because of what it might be teaching us, because of how we're going to grow through this. Maybe you're going to, if you would have aced this test last time, who knows what the path would have been for you with that versus right now. There might be people you've met and situations you've come across with this having to retake it right now, that when you look back at your life of a few years from now, you'll be like, thank God I didn't pass the first time, because maybe I would have never entered the field at the perfect right time that I meant to, and in the right scenarios and the right situations that helped me be who I am today. So we just don't know. We can't compare and be hard on ourselves when we, it's easy to say we can't do it, but it's something we all struggle with. We just have to catch ourselves when we're doing it. It's like the bamboo tree, that's comparing itself to the oak tree and thinks the oak tree is so much better than me because it's sturdy and thick, and but if there was a major storm that came through, the bamboo would be able to be flexible and to move with that wind, where the oak tree might fall over and die. So we all have our own strengths, and we have to remind ourselves that what's happening for me is perfect for me in some way, and I have to just trust that. That's the best answer I can give for you on the comparison note.
I think that's the best answer we could have gotten, to be honest, Leah. Thank you so much. I don't know about everyone else, but I was furiously taking notes. My notebook looks really messy at the moment. But yeah, amazing. And I just wanted to briefly tell the participants that also thank them for their questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't get through all of them, but I am taking note of them. Hopefully in the future we can address them at some point. But yeah, Christian,
Yeah, Leah, that was fantastic. We're very blessed to have you on this webinar today. It came at an amazing time. For everybody that's watching, this was turned around. This was all set up within 48 hours from idea to webinar, which is amazing. It couldn't have been possible without Leah and Balance. Do get onto Balance, and if Scott was promoted to host, he would have said, do get onto Elevate Labs as well. You know, he is all for the IQ tests. You know, it is an amazing brain training app that is going around. So great things that are going on. Thank you again, Leah. We really do appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Sorry I couldn't answer all of your questions, but you know, if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, feel free to do so. I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. It's Lesant, Lesant. I'm on Facebook. Happy to respond to your questions individually, because I know there's a lot of important ones there, and I'm happy to be of service. So
thank you. Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Leah.
you again. It was amazing.
yeah.
Have a great rest of the Saturday in paradise.
Yeah, you too.
Cheers. Good luck, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.